No.
Yeah, we met last year.
Yeah, I moderated the one last year. I guess that is, yeah.
Pen on the music, we're going to hold it up.
Okay.
I have my noise canceling headphones in the car.
That's why I drove here last night and stayed the night instead of trying to drive here this morning. And I'm driving to Indio or to Palm Springs tonight because Coachella is also happening. So I'm already very tired. It starts tomorrow, yeah. It's very weird they're in the same week this year, but glad I was able to do both. So, yeah, I'll rest on Monday. That's the trip. I don't know if I should, am I just...
I'd be happy to go down to
Yep, let's go.
Hey everybody, welcome to NAMM. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining anyone who's watching out on the internet right now. My name is Lyndsey Parker. I'm from Yahoo Entertainment. Welcome to what's sure to be a fascinating and very educational conversation with the 360 Reality Audio Mixing team that, congratulations, just won this year's Grammy Award for Best Immersive Audio Album. Yay! Speech. You want to give the speech you gave at the premiere ceremony? For those who didn't watch it.
I don't want to. Does it work? Does it work? Yeah? Okay. I don't want to repeat myself what I did at the Grammys, what I talked there, but it was a wonderful project, and we were very surprised and happy to win the Grammy. We both have some Grammys before already, but the last one was always the sweetest one. It was a very special one, and it was, I think we mixed it in a very creative way, and that's what we can talk later. So,
yeah.
Yes.
So
we
we're
had
here.
good content with Stuart Copeland and Ricky Cage, of course.
Yeah.
That was great stuff to work with.
So we're here with Herbert Waltl and Eric Schilling, who I've met before. Met you here last year at NAMM when we were talking about the Grammy you won for Best Immersive Audio Album for Alicia Keys' Alicia last year. This year you guys won it for Divine Tides, which is by world music artist and UNICEF Global Ambassador Ricky Cage, as you mentioned, and legendary composer and Police drummer Stuart Copeland, who I'm a big Police fan. So congratulations again. So I want to discuss your experiences with mixing in 360 RA for not just this project, mainly this project, but just for all your iconic artists that you've worked with. Share some of your favorite 360 RA projects. So. I guess, but before we do that, why don't you briefly introduce yourselves with, give us, everyone, your little bio about how you got into this.
So a little bio about me. I started the mix when I was like 19. I started in a big studio. As a lot of people did then. I ran tape machines, so I've been mixing, I don't know, I guess that's like 45 years. So I started very young and did a lot of stereo work for years and years in the studio, and then I got into doing surround around 2000. I also do a lot of live broadcast work for award shows. And then we started our studio, but it's been 3 years. And so we do a lot of Sony content in our studio, and I've been doing that for the most part, pretty much full time for the last few years.
Yeah, and I'm actually started out as a classical pianist. I studied piano and composition, and after that I got more and more in electronic music. Actually, that's a long time ago. Electronic music was very exotic with a lot of experimental things, and at that time already I had the idea to work in 3D with my compositions. And in the meantime, of course, I walked over to all genres. I did a lot of jazz with Chick Corea, and then finally a lot of pop here with Eric, and we had a lot of actually pop icons and rock stars who we mixed for. And I started with immersive actually very, very early on, when before DVD came out. I was invited by Philips because I got kind of ideas what I had. They knew about my ideas about 3D. They chose me before we had 5.1 format, before DVD had a name, what I think about it and what content could be. So my thing was always about content, the art of it, what you do with it. And that was a very long time ago, and from there DVD, come SSCD, then come our own studio, then did other things, and then now finally be in immersive. And since maybe 3 years, my company Media Hyperium, we built our studio, our company in Los Angeles, and doing mainly, as we do everything. Our studio can do Atmos, can do MPEG-H, can do Sony. We have like, I think, close to 20 speakers hanging around. So we are ready for any format. But I must say, I personally really enjoy mostly Sony 360 format for several reasons, but I can explain later. So we are, and also Divine Tide has won a Grammy in Sony 360. And so, the year before, Eric mixed Alicia Keys would also won a Grammy in 360. And it was actually also mixed in our studio. So we are lucky. 2 years in a row, our studio won the Grammys, both in Sony 360, so that means maybe something, I don't know. And and Eric, of course, won twice in a row. I wasn't involved in Alicia, but this year.
You're on a roll.
Yeah.
Let's go for a three-peat at the 2024
I bet you
Grammys.
we will try.
I think good things come in threes. I think it could happen. I'm just going to put it out there. So, as you're mentioning, last year you guys won for the Alicia Keys album. You won the Best Immersive Audio Grammy then for the album Alicia. This year you won for Divine Tides. Very different record. Obviously, you must have had a very different approach. I'd love to hear your thought process about how this project differed from the one you previously won a Grammy for.
Well, I mean, one thing I would start off by saying is that each time you do a immersive mix, depending on the content, what it's like, you change your approach. So the album I did the year before was a much more pop-based album with a lot of drum loops. This album was like a world music album, but with Stewart playing drums on it. So it's a combination of a drum kit, but with tablas and flutes and strings and little hand percussion. So Herbert and me, when we started it, it was a very different palette. So the main thing I would stress is that each time you do a immersive mix, it's the content that will tell you what you need to do. You don't really use a template, because if I'm doing pop, it's different than what we did. We were very fortunate that the music was very good, which is always very helpful, and we were able to experiment a lot, and we do a lot of experimenting. We may say, let's put the flute in the back up high, and say, well, no, we don't like that. Let's try it here, let's try it there. I encourage people to always try things and experiment to see how it feels. Want to add to that?
Yeah, how we're always starting is really listening to the music. It's the last 4 years, everybody is talking about technology, how to mix, what plugins you use, what formats you use, all the things. And it was a little bit in the background, what do you actually do with content? And as I said, for me, it was what you do in content was since 30 years, because when I went with Philips, it was like, what you actually, your job was go out, talk to the Rolling Stones, talk to Vienna Philharmonics, talk to anybody else, what they would like to do in immersive or Maximus 5.1. What actually the content can deliver and what they want as an artist, the artist vision. And that's how we work today also. We look really at the music, we listen to it, we're analyzing it, and the music should talk to the mixer, to the engineers, to the producer, and then you make a decision what you do in immersive. So I would say a lot of the mixes are underwhelming because engineers play like in a sandbox. They put something over here, and it sounds fun, and something pops up, but it makes the musical sense. We, on the other hand, we look for the music, how it's written, what it does. So do we have like a simple thing, call and response? Often in a melody, in any genre, it's a classic like hip hop. You have da 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 da, ba 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 ba. Yeah, so it's a response. Sometimes the response should be very close together because it's how the music language is. But sometimes they should be actually on maybe spatially distant because it has a dramatic effect, a theatrical effect. And so is this with all kinds of instruments, of course. Instruments, guitars, riffs, talk to another guitar riff or to a drummer or to a bass line. So what you do with this, how you place that in space, and that makes then musical sense. So that's actually what I would talk is the art of immersive mixing when you talk about the music. Then, of course, I'm lucky to work with Eric, one of the brilliant engineers, who has all these tools and know everything about to make all that actually on the technique, on the engineering side happening. So immersive mix is more than a mix. We have to understand as an engineer that there is a production point of view. There is a creative point. There is because if you make a wrong decision, you can completely destroy a song or a project completely because you're so powerful. What you can do, I can screw it up big time. Always says is one example: a brass section, a brass ensemble creates a chord, 3-4 notes, dominant seventh chord, and suddenly you split them apart. Well, that's wrong because suddenly you don't have the chord structure is gone. So you have to watch out with this. But on the other hand, maybe the solo is here and the solo there from the trumpet and the trombone. You may want to put this across because now you have the possibility to do that and create an environment with a musical environment and you're in it. And you're, of course, emotionally much more engaged when that's happening as you're just here using up front. The same is with rhythmical patterns, like Stuart Copeland. He played his drum set plus 34 ethical instruments. So we had a blast with so many percussion, what we can do, how the pattern he worked, how he wrote, how they react to each other and what you do. So this is all, the music talks to you and then we both making decisions of how we're placing it and not just put it out quickly, wherever sounds funny. Because a few weeks later you hear back, it doesn't sound good anymore, it's boring. It was just an effect and there was no musical concept behind. And that, I think, makes a difference.
Absolutely. So you use the term sandbox. You had a big sandbox to play in with this one. This is the mission statement of the record, of the Divine Tides record, which I got from their website. So this was a record, too, and I quote from their website. To elevate the senses into a realm of spiritual solitude where the soul is free, one with itself, one with time, one with our planet. All individuals are interconnected and the decisions one makes affects all life around us. Each individual life plays a crucial role in maintaining the balance and serves equally. Divine Tides illustrates these thoughts through its diverse musical canvas, I'm going somewhere with this, that showcases a world in which we can adapt to change, just like the moving tides. So there's a lot to unpack here. Did you have a sit down with Ricky Kedge and Stuart Copeland about how this grand vision they had could be brought to vivid life in RA?
Well, you know my website better than I do. I forgot about this. But let me go back. This is actually a statement not from mine. It's from Ricky Kedge.
Did you write that?
No.
Okay.
It's from Ricky Kedge. And Ricky is very much engaged in the United Nations. He's an ambassador for the United Nations. He's for the WHO. He's for UNICEF. And so he does a lot for the environment, and that is his calling. And his music is, he said he writes music for a purpose. Music should have that's his thing. So his purpose in this was, of course, where he's very much engaged in environmental, in saving the planet. And in his first, when he won for this record, which was the stereo version, he made a statement, and I'm paraphrasing about, he said, the world should be a family. The family is the world. And we should live in peace as in our human species, but it's not enough. We have to go further behind. So we should also live in peace with the animals, with the plants, with everything around, because we're all one planet, and that is kind of his message. So it's all about coexisting with other species, with the elements, with water we drink, with the air we breathe. All that has to be one and has to be protected, and we have to peacefully coexist with all this. And that, he said, is Divine Tide all about, coexisting with everything.
Eric, do you?
So we had this, we didn't have a specific talk to answer your question. Yeah, but I knew about this. And the interesting thing about the Divine Tide was actually, it was done during the pandemic. So it was all done remote, completely. Stuart and Ricky even didn't meet.
They never met.
Actually never met in person until it was finished.
How did they even come together? Did they know each other? How did they know each other and come to do this?
I don't know that story.
Ricky worked with Stuart before in another, I don't know if maybe also remote, but he worked with him before on another record. And this record was actually produced and in Africa, South Africa choirs, in London with the London Philharmonics, in Asia, of course, a lot. In Vietnam, there was somebody, and of course, Stuart in the US, recorded his drums in the US. It was all over the world. And the interesting about mixing, what we also thought, you mixed up all the different languages, musical languages. The African music has absolutely nothing to do actually with the Western music, because the Western music has nothing to do with Indian music. That is total different style, different harmonies, even different tunings. And they brought this all together. And that was one element where we thought and we put things and how we mixing it, how these different elements you could do in a spatial thing. But it was just, the motivation was just the musical contents, to be honest. And we not think about the clean border when I mix. It was thinking about what is the music, what we hear, how we can do things.
Well, weren't you guys involved kind of from the very start with Divine Tides? This wasn't something that was given to you like, oh, and now mix it. Like, weren't you kind of involved from its creation from pretty early on?
No,
we
were brought in towards the ending. They were still doing the stereos, correct?
We advised him about how to record it.
Herbert, we did talk to him about what we needed to do good immersive, like how to split out the strings and stuff. So we gave him, which is something we do with a lot of clients. We kind of prepare them for what we're going to be doing in immersive. But from a conceptual point of view, they had already started that.
Well, what were some of the most fun aspects or fun elements of getting to take all these, beautiful, unique sounds and play with them in the RA sandbox, if you will?
Well, I would start by saying, one, I've traveled to that part of the world a few times when I was in my 40s and stuff, so I know the music pretty well. So for one, for me, it was a real treat because I really like that kind of stuff and the way they sing and the sort of tonal structures that they use. So for me, compared to doing like a straight ahead pop project, there was such a big palette of stuff that we could play with. And to kind of go back to what I said before, when you mix an immersive, you will experiment, but at the end of the day, you will find the place where a particular part will work with the song. I have this thing I always tell people about immersive. It shouldn't distract from the song. It should not be a carnival. You're not showing off the platform. You're just allowing people to kind of delve into the song more. So for me, the content was fantastic to work with because it's very rich in its tonalities and also its chordal structures.
And Herbert, for you, what were the most fun or enjoyable aspects of working with all of these unique elements?
Well, first, because there were unique elements and there were a lot of them. So that's challenging because it's a lot more work or so. When you have so much, you have to make decisions, many hundreds of decisions, and that's so it's just more work. But it's fun how the concept comes together. And as I said, there's so many things. There's a music language of the different countries, of the different cultures. What comes together, you have a lot of choirs, you have orchestra, you have Rick Stewart as a drummer. So all bring this together into one is wonderful. And I always want to add here something about the art. When I studied music, I had a wonderful teacher, and he told me, when you compose, do not compose on the piano. Because you as a pianist, when you make this chord, ding dong, you immediately write, when you write on the piano, write it down, dang, after this comes this chord. Because I did this thing probably 10 million times. So immediately the next thing what I think about is doing this. So when you want to be really abstract free, and that's what you want, authentic, abstract free, then you are, then you actually create something authentic. So you should, he told me, write on paper only. Not on piano, not with the piano. Once you have it down, your basic thoughts, and you of course go to the piano or whatever and orchestrate it. But you have to be completely untouched, detached from everything, so that you can be authentic. And that's the same, the challenge what you have today with immersive, because you're using all the different plugins and all the different whatever systems to create immersive, that the programs itself guides you, reads a manual, and it guides you to a certain thing, because it works. It maybe even has some templates already in. Just push the button, make boom, boom. Sounds great. I'm using it. And they're using it 50,000 times, the same thing. And that, of course, doesn't deserve the music, because every song is different. So you should really have kind of free yourselves from the program, that you can make your own personalized decision. And we're discussing this a lot, and then we came up, and then he finds a tool, and he finds a lot of plugins to make it work. And of course, it also a lot of trial out. I have some ideas, and then, well, that was not something that it didn't work. So let's try something different. So that happens, of course, a lot. But the point is that not the technology guide you what the music should do. The music is in your head. The music guides you. And then you use the technology what is appropriate to make your decision. That's with every production is the case, and especially immersive, because it's such a young technology, young experience, musical experience. So we very easy fall in the trap to use something what is already there because it's easy and it goes fast. But now is the time where it's beginning. You really can be creative and should develop your own style and your own decisions, and that's the difference. So we hear a lot of underwhelming mixes because they just used actually what the platform or what the program gives you as first choices, and that is not always very desirable.
I'm curious about this idea of, you talk about making a mistake, or a mistake could like ruin a song or whatever. What were some times where you tried something, and how did you know it wasn't right, and how?
It's pretty simple. If you say you take, so a lot of times what you'll do is if they already have a stereo, you will listen to the stereo to see how they balance the song, what parts are important. So if I take a part that's not meant to stand out, and we put it somewhere and it starts standing out, we will find it distracting to the song. So really you use your musicality to go, that part's really distracting if we put it there. We need to find a different place to put it so it makes sense in how it's been arranged.
I'm really curious about that point. Without naming names or throwing any artist or other producer or studio under the bus, is that something you're witnessing with this pretty new technology that a lot of people are using it as a gimmick to show off, like, look, we're doing something in RA, and it's not actually serving the music?
I mean, I think it's natural when you learn something new, the first thing you do is experiment, and you push it maybe farther than you might. So I think when you start it, you kind of have to sort out what works. So I think some of what you hear is people who are brand new to it, who are still experimenting. The only thing I would say is we refer back a lot to the stereo, more just how it musically feels, not what it sounds like. So I think you have to expect that to an extent, that people are going to push, and hopefully as they gain more experience, they realize that the music is the most important part of it.
I will be even make a harder judgment on this. And I see actually a danger for immersive, because I believe, just to say a number, maybe 80% of the immersive mixes what's out there, they're kind of underwhelming. And they're underwhelming because the whole immersive experience to create it was thrown just to engineers. And immersive mixing is much more than an engineering task. As I said before, it's a producer task, it's an artistic task. And a lot of, not that all engineers cannot do that. There's a lot of very talented engineers, they're very artistic, very creative, they know music, they're very intuitive, very sensitive to everything, they're perfect. But many of them, they are just seeing it as an engineering task and want to do it very quick, because they not get much paid from the labels, they not get enough paid for the mixing, so it's a business. Of course, that's their life business, so they make it very quick. They don't have the time to get into too deep, and seeing it's just a technical exercise, while it is much more an artistic exercise, much more than the technique. And this comes not always through, put it this way.
So what advice would you give to artists, creators, engineers who are either here or watching on YouTube who, they are new to this. They're excited to play in the sandbox. Maybe they've lost sight, how would you tell them what advice would you give them about making sure that they're serving the music first?
That is actually the only advice you can give. I mean, especially young artists to create their own music. They know their own music's best. They know their own vision and mission they have with their songs. So just stay true to yourself. Don't be, do like you said, a joyride or a carnival with it to try something else, and stay true to your original vision and then extend it into a spatial concept. And if you make something new, the ideal is start from the very beginning with a spatial concept. Explore that, like, we mix God of War, the soundtrack. For God of War Ragnarok, the next, it came out already, the next game. And Bear McGeary, the composer, who's actually quite famous composer in the gaming world, came to the studio afterwards. We mixed it and listened to it, and he got nuts. He was nuts. He was, oh my God, what's happening? Oh my God. Because he, as a composer, found now new ideas by just listening. So, oh, here's a hole. If I would have known that, I could have put here something in a clarinet or whatever. Put in another line in here. So he was completely excited about this experience, listening experience, that now as a composer, he would do a completely different concept. And he told us for the next one, he wanted to write something, put a little bit on whatever, Pro Tools or so, to come in as a test. Listen back with us, and then see how that works, then go back to write more. So immediately have the spatial concept in his head first, and secondly, also trying it out, making a work in progress. That's, of course, an ideal thing. So if somebody does it for themselves, that is the right thing to do. I mean, have a spatial concept in your heads first, stay true to what your visions really are, and then expanding it and make it to an even larger emotional impact involvement than you could ever do with stereo.
Well, that advice applies to when... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Eric.
I was going to add to that from a mixer's point of view. When I first started to mix, when I was starting my career, like, very few folks start off being that great at it. It's a skill you acquire and you learn. And in mixing immersive, when I first started to do it, it took me a while to find kind of how it worked for me and how I heard it. So I would encourage you, if you have the resources to do some of the work just for yourself, well, I call it woodshedding. You need to just kind of spend some time doing it till it feels more comfortable to you.
Yeah, that sort of semi-answers the question I was about to ask, is obviously an artist knows their own music best, but it's a little different when someone hands you their baby, basically, to do it. Because, I imagine there were some unique challenges with this album. Divine Tides, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, it obviously was already a very ambitious soundscapey record to begin with, and if I'm not mistaken, it had already won a Grammy for Best New Age Album the year before it then repeated its success with the Immersive Award this year. So, what were the unique challenges of taking a project like this from Ricky Kedge and Stuart Copeland and, fulfilling their vision? I don't want to say improving upon it, but, or embellishing. I don't know what the right verb would be.
I have this saying, which is, you don't win for good sound unless the music's great. You just don't. And the reality is, what we do, because we listen to stuff all day long, 5 days a week, I oftentimes like to get stuff I haven't heard because I get my first impressions. I'm not preconceived. When I used to record stuff from the very first note and spend 9 months on an album, by the end I had no perspective. So what we get is that we get a fresh perspective. And I would say if you're self-producing your own content or doing it all, you've got to be able to get away from it a little bit. So I didn't find it challenging. I was like, wow, this is great palette. And our years of experience between Herbert and me, we kind of moved in a certain direction.
Did Ricky Kedge and Stuart Copeland give you any input or did they just hand it over to you and then you presented them with a mostly finished product?
That goes back to your first question before, what was real fun on this project? This was exactly the point. We had no input, just go with it, do it, and let us see. And anything what we sent them then to approval, they loved it. And that's what my tiny things what we should change or so. But in basics, the concept and the overall, they gave us total free. Go and run, do it. You know what you want to do, and it was it was of course wonderful.
Is
but
that
then
unusual?
We got feedback from them, of course.
Is that unusual for an artist to be so, I guess, trusting and just hand it over?
I mean, you know, my experience once you've done this for a while, and you have a certain reputation, like people know what you've done. What they will do as a rule is let you take your kind of pass at it, then they'll give you feedback. And it's clearly when I did the Alicia stuff, she heard some stuff and said, no, I don't really hear it that way, I hear it this way. But generally they want to get what your take is first.
Are you like, is your studio Media Hyperion, are you like basically the go-to guys in this business at this point?
I don't know if we're the go-to guys, but we're one of a lot of people that...
People out there are nodding like, yeah, you are. You're being modest, which I appreciate, but...
Thank you. I like
but they're saying yes.
I like to believe that, but there are other people who are doing this, of course. Yeah.
But you guys kind of got in on it earlier than a lot of...
6 years ago, it's been 6 years ago, I first worked with Herbert on a immersive project before it was really starting to blow up. Remember what we did, the stuff we did at the ranch?
Yeah.
So, and we had both done surround, so it wasn't new to do this kind of stuff, but I hadn't done immersive yet, so it's been 6 years since we did that.
What did attract, go ahead.
I think what we're doing different, we challenged ourselves to make something new, to create something different, and not just what we did this one before. And one thing actually what I love so much here at Sony, what I love so much is the floor level speakers. So you have actually 3 levels. You have it on the floor, you have it in your ear, and then you have it height. And others don't have that, okay? But this one has it, and this gives you so many more creative choices. And it's as I always say, you know, this makes no sense why immersive goes from here to here. That's not immersive. It is semi-castrated, right? It has the lower one, the south hemisphere doesn't exist. Yeah, it's only the north hemisphere. Well, it's not true. And I mention this because a friend of mine is a scientist. He wrote a paper on it. I think it was a PhD paper or so about the brain, what you actually recognize, the sounds and the impact. And there is what we're doing, because also go back to the rudiments when we still were, you know, running around in the woods, and the brain developed, and we want to have seen, of course, where the danger is. So if from here comes a bird and want to attack me, I want to exactly know where the bird comes, or anything else. But I also, remember, I want to know when the snake comes on the floor. So my senses and my emotion, fear also is on the lower hemisphere exactly the same than it would be on the higher. So that means also with music, I can locate the sounds the same precise ways than I would have done it here. And also emotionally or musically, it gives me from the lower one, the same effect. It's not like it's a secondary sound source, what has a musical effect to me as a human being. It's the same. So why would you not lose this? And we're doing this on purpose a lot. We put, like God of War, we put cellos on in the floors, and and then it also, of course, it prolongs the vertical axle. And I always say when in headphones, I mean, people listen to the first in headphones. It takes a while to understand spatial because you need to get used to it. When you have this longer axle here, it's so much easier, and people, I myself, adjusting much faster to spatiality, because now you're not stopping here, so it naturally goes through here, and now it's just really natural, and I'm in it. I'm really in it. And then the bass or voice comes also from the lower levels in my ears, and that is theatrically, of course, fantastic. Yeah.
I mean, you kind of said what I was going to point out, which is in Sony, we found the floor speakers to be extremely useful because you create a soundscape that goes from here all the way up to here, and especially in like the New Age or the world music stuff we've done, or the God of War soundtrack, where there's timpanis and high voices, you can really make a pretty cool soundscape. And then when I'm doing pop stuff, I'll use the floors for lower stuff, so it almost becomes a sub, but not exactly.
I imagine that getting into RA, I mean, when you got into it six years ago, whatever, like you already had so much experience between the two of you. You'd already done so much. Did it kind of feel like you were talking about, you know, opening up all these other parts of it? Did it kind of feel like you were reborn? I mean, you must have felt like you were, you know, having whole new second act careers or something to have this new sandbox.
Reborn is too strong as a word. Okay.
Well, you tell me how it felt,
But,
like how it opened up new avenues of creativity.
I mean,
for
my
you.
very first of all, immersive is not new. Vivaldi did this already, okay, in the 15th century. So it's not like we're inventing something that artists never thought about it. And we as a genius, we're thinking about it, and Sony and Dolby and whatever, finally found, oh my God, there's something beautiful. No, it's already done, long over hundreds of years. So that's the first thing. And as I said, I was very early involved in this, really involved in this, in the whole development as a business and researcher. But on the other hand, tell you the truth, my first immersive experience, I was at an open air festival a long time ago. I was 16 years old, was in my sleeping bag. Don't tell you details anymore about this, but I was sleeping bag and Pink Floyd came on. And it was a festival for 200,000 people. And they came on the day before with many, many trucks, and everybody was wondering, why it's Pink Floyd? And but it was strange, so many trucks they brought. And then when they started, suddenly I heard a sound going around in a circle. It was very simple, of course. It was a long, long time ago. But it was live. It's a festival, 200,000 people, and they start, woo, about 200,000 people around. And I jumped out of my sleeping bag. Oh my God! And my thing was sparking. What you can do, you know, it was really like, oh my God, that gives opportunity. And that was the very first time where I actually really experienced it, thanks to Pink Floyd, when I was 16 years old. So when I was born, when I was 16 years old, maybe then I was reborn.
And then let me guess, you had really long hair then, right?
Well, Eric, I guess, you know, I answer the. Did you feel when you started focusing on doing this like a new burst of creativity?
It was fun because I could, you know, my whole thing when I mix, something that's very important to me is it's cohesive, that things fit together. They're not little separate things. And in immersive, you can do a lot of things with reverb and effects that are really hard to do when you're doing stereo. Because the whole idea is to create depth. You know, you don't want everything to be right in your face all the time. So that's what I like about doing it.
Well, I like the fact that you used the word cohesive, because I was going to ask, do you think that because of the composition of the Divine Tides record that, you know, it's like, you know, it's basically a bunch of artists coming together to create one cohesive piece of music.
Right.
Like, do you think it lent itself especially well to the immersive format?
Absolutely.
Can you explain?
Well, I mean, like Herbert made the point, if there was a vocal part that happened, we put in front, there might be a flute that would actually talk to the vocal part. So we could create a dialogue between them by having the flute above your head a little bit and back, which would be talking, so parts can talk to each other, as he called it, a call and response. And the music, and it had that to start with. We just had the luxury in immersive to be able to pull that apart so that was more pronounced.
So, do you want to answer that as well, Herbert, about how this album, Divine Tides, lent itself so well to what you wanted to do with it?
Yeah, I mean, Divine Tides led to because it was such a multifaceted, multi-leveled project. This was not one straightforward, you know. Obviously, if you have just a piano recording, piano solo, violin, or just a singer, it's hard to do things like this. So the more elements you have, and they are working well together, so more you can do this. But I would say every recording and every genre has a place. It should be placed in a spatial concept. So it's not limited to something or, you know, something was. But it's a different experience now. What we have, and this different experience, we have to learn how to produce this as well. We have to learn how to appreciate it as a listener, and how to react to this. And the more it is organic, put together, that it makes a musical sense, as I talked before. So easy, it's accessible, and so much more joy it is. For example, we're doing also with Eric a lot of legacy work, legacy catalogs. And when they put them in a spatial concept, suddenly you hear, oh, there's another guitar we never heard, because it was so covered up in the stereo, because it was there, but never really you recognized it. But now in the spatial, you actually find the full vision of the band or of the composition, because now everything is in the open. Yeah.
So obviously the reason we're here, the name of this panel is, congratulations again that this album, Divine Tides, won the Best Immersive Grammy. And it did win over at least a couple of, kind of mainstream pop titles. It won over Christina Aguilera's album, and it won over the Chainsmokers. Actually, Mike Piacentini, who was nominated for the Chainsmokers record, I did a panel with him earlier today in this very booth. But I guess first, it's a two-part question. One, were you surprised that the winner of this category would be like, a world music, global genre album, as opposed to one of a more mainstream pop title? And, I guess it's kind of a loaded question, but why do you think it won over some, big heavy hitters?
I like to say because our mix is pretty good, so that's why
well,
it won.
Yeah, that goes without saying.
And of course, there have been a lot of colleagues out there. They're wonderful, and they did also great mixes. And when we were nominated and saw our competition, said, "Oh my God," because obviously, often what happens, people choose by name recognition. Oh, I know that artist. I love that artist, and gets a check mark. And so we were skeptical if we really can pull this off. But as I said, I think it's also, think about it, second year in a row, 361 won the Grammys for that, in that category. And I think there is also say something for the format, that the format invites you to be more creative. As I talked about these three levels of speakers, what translates wonderful to the headphones. And headphones is where it's actually happening. I mean, nobody has 25 speakers at home hanging around or have a sound bar. So it's actually in the headphones. And because it translates so well in the headphone experience, I think that is a positive. And as I said, I hope we won because one mix are really better, to be fair.
I guess my answer would be I knew we had all five things were very good. They were very different. So I was hopeful, but you never know until they announce it. I know I was really proud of the work. We heard it months afterwards. And because I'm one of those people that I'm my own worst critic when it comes to my work. So hearing it a couple months afterwards, and I didn't want to pick it apart, told me I think it's pretty good. So I was proud of the work we did. I thought it really serviced the content, and then there again I would say the content is so good that I felt like it really helped propel us.
So, well, congratulations again. What are you guys working on? What is Media Hyperium working on right now that might win a Grammy next year that you can tease us about?
We're working on one project, but we cannot talk about it. I was just learned. I don't know what. We did the God of War project, what we think was a lot of fun for us and was very challenging, and I think came out very, very good.
I've heard that you've said it was some of the best music you've ever been given to work with.
The soundtrack's like doing a great film soundtrack, but really eclectic, because it's not like traditional. It has strings, but it has all kinds of choirs, and what's the thing? It has hurdy-gurdies on it, all kinds of weird sounds. But it's so well done.
It's Bear McCreary, right?
Pardon?
Who was the composer, Bear McCreary?
Yeah, and it's funny enough, I was watching the new Lord of the Rings sort of spin-off, the prequel. I'm going, this sounds familiar, and I figured out that he wrote the score for that too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the score is very good, very well recorded.
In Iceland, right?
Well, that's one place, yeah.
Wow.
They were like all over the map with this stuff. So,
very cool. Well, congratulations again on that, and maybe we'll see you at the Grammys next year. But before we go, do we have any questions? Okay.
So, I'm not 100% familiar with what you won the Grammy for, but I have a question. Did you guys mix it? Completely mix it, like from scratch, or did you get it from someone else who had already mixed it for stereo?
A lot of projects that we get and I get are a combination of stems and source tracks. So we can kind of pick. And I'll give you an example. On some content I do that's more pop oriented, sometimes trying to reproduce the loop sounds and what they do to kicks inside of a mix is very hard to do. So sometimes I'll use the stem of the loop, but I'll actually redo the vocal and stuff. So in this, it was a combination of some stems, and we had some source tracks.
Yeah, sorry. I guess, how does your approach change, sort of, when you're like, have you ever been in a circumstance where you were given a job to mix a song or something, and also mix it for spatial audio? So like you mixed it from scratch, right? So how does that sort of affect, like when do you start approaching it as like the spatial, like what point in the mixing stage, or are you kind of always considering and always panning things, or is there like a certain, like, you know how towards the end of the mix you might want to get more into like the mix bus and that kind of thing? Like, is there a point in the mix where you start thinking more about the surround sound, or is it all at once kind of as you're EQing and compressing?
Herbert and me are doing a project right now where we're doing the stereo and the immersive. We're doing the stereo first, because inherently the stereo can be harder to do. So we're doing the stereo, but we built a template where as soon as we're happy with the stereo and the client signs off on the stereo, then we can jump into immersive. But during the stereo, we're talking about, when we get to immersive, this would be cool to do this and do that. So we're talking about it. It would be very hard to, you tend to remember those things, you know. Do you want to respond?
First off, I want to say thanks to you both for participating in the AES Immersive Academy series. That was really valuable, especially during COVID. It was like a lifesaver for me. But my question is, since the 360 is really a headphone delivery format, but you're obviously mixing on loudspeakers. So do you think that's important to get to where you need to go, or why don't you, how would you explain the relationship between the two?
Well, does it work? Yeah, it works. When we mix in immersive, we always check it on our speakers. Then we check it how it sounds in the microphone, in headphones, and then we go to a sound bar. And see, so it has to work. The spatial concept, the mix has to work in all these environments. So it's always a check in headphones. We don't think we don't mix on headphones. We do not that for certain reasons. I think there's another panel, another discussion about this. But it has to work on your speakers first, and then you have to maybe do some minor adjustment for the headphones, because that is what the clientele listens to it, so it has to be perfect for the headphones. It's like similar when it was a long time ago, when you mixed, and then you took your mix with a CD or a music cassette even to your car. Then when I came, the first time when I came to the US in '88, and I started mixing with producing with some great mixers, and it was at the one session, the engineer said, so, well, let's sound how it looks in how it sounds in my Chevy. Chevy was just a name. What he meant is like, what are you talking about? No, that's what we do. It sounds in my Chevy. So he went out to the car, was a mediocre sound system, and put it in there. So how would it sound in the car? Because at that time, 60-80% music listening was done in cars. So it has to sound good in an average car. So we adjust the mix so it sounded kind of okay in the car. So that's what we do now with headphones or with sound bars. Before it was radio mix. You see how it will sound in the radio. So you put the voices a few dBs higher, etc., because it was required by radio actually. So yeah, you mix also you mix in your speakers, but you have a very close eye on, or ear on how it will sound in headphones. And we do this in a systematic way.
I'm going to add a thought to that, which is one of my theories is headphone profiles are changing constantly. And my fear is if you mix to a specific profile, you're locking yourself into what sounds good on that profile. So in my attitude, we're future-proofing it by doing it on a system where we're not having to... So just like what he said, we mix and then we listen in different environments, which is what I had to do a good part of my career. I mean, I actually worked with my very first job at the plant when I was starting. The chief had a Chevy Nova, like a 56 Chevy Nova, and he would literally go out to his car and we would broadcast an AM thing to his car. So my whole career we've been, how does it sound in the studio? How does it sound in my car? How does it sound on, you know, all those things. So this is just an extension of that. But I do think you're going to see a trend where people, one, because of the cost of having to build the studio and what people have to spend, you're going to see a trend where people may start on headphones, but then go to a facility where they can listen to it on speakers. I do think that's a very important part of the process.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Do you think for someone like me who doesn't have all the money in the world to build a studio like that, is it worth trying to learn in headphones and later on sort of approaching it, the speakers, when I have the opportunity? Or someone else was telling me that sort of that would be kind of backwards, I guess. But I mean, I only have so many resources.
That's kind of my point, is not everybody is going to have the resources that we have. I mean, we've been doing this a long time. We're fairly well paid for it, so we've been able to spend to buy things. And I'm realistic about the fact that somebody like you is not going to be able to go out and spend like 15 grand on speakers. So I think you can get started, and the headphone technology is improving, and the custom, you know, HRTFs are improving. So I think what's going to happen is you can identify a place where you can go and listen to your mix on speakers somewhere for a few hours and make adjustments. Because we had a chance to hear a lot of content that was done on headphones itself. A lot of it just did not sound that good. And I don't blame the people specifically doing it. It's just they're in a position where they don't have the resources that we have. Yeah, and some people have the theory, well, it's only for headphones, so why do we care? But I don't think that future-proofs the content, you know.
Anybody else? All right, well, once again, I've been Lyndsey Parker from Yahoo Entertainment. This is Herbert Waltl and Eric Schilling. They are the Grammy-winning R360 RA audio team who did Divine Tides. You can pick it up, Ricky Kedge and Stu Copeland. Congratulations again. Thank you for your expertise. Good luck at next year's Grammys. I'm not trying to jinx anything. I just think you guys are on a roll. You're the go-to guys.
Okay, thank you.
So thanks, everybody, for watching. Have a great NAMM weekend.